Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available, too, at carolthecoach.com.
Now, I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell. So you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
You get what you need.
Russell is really at a place where he is deciding, what do I need? When you ask the question, you know the answer. And so for our sex addicts out there, if you're wrestling with, or as I say, reckoning with, your urges and cravings and what you need to do, you've got the show that you need to understand what is going to have to happen to be healthy. And for those of you that have listened to me, that's those 10 recovery tools. That's going to meetings of some sort, having a sponsor, and really doing the work that comes with the book that's associated with the meetings. If you're a partner, I want you to hear this too, because I want you to know what I want him or her to do to get healthy. So to follow that up, it's to do the internal work that is so important, the transformational work to get healthy through that program, and of course through therapy, and then to develop a fellowship so that we're not treating you in a vacuum. You have people in your life that are willing to be there for you day or night. That's what fellowship is all about. And then, of course, see a CSAT, a certified sex addiction therapist, and go to a therapy group for sex addicts if you can. I realize they're not as readily available as I would like them to be. Pray, meditate, or journal. You have to pick at least one. Have accountability tools, Covenant Eyes, some sort of tracking device to help you make the right decision, to slow you down. Maybe a polygraph test so that you know you do the next right thing. And then read about your brain. This is an issue. This is an issue not necessarily of just morality, but it's really a brain science issue. This compulsivity, if you've got it managed right now, will come back if you don't have enough supports. Now, if you're a partner listening to those 10 tools, you can find them on my website, Sex Help with Carol the Coach, under resources. But today, this show is really for you. And if you're an addict and you have a partner, I would listen to the show too, because I've got a specialist. I've got a professional who really understands partner betrayal, and she has the tools and resources that she wants to share today to talk about that complex trauma that occurs as a result of discovery and disclosure and that journey. And I know you may feel helpless and you may feel hopeless, but the truth is both Emellina Belle, and I believe that you are stronger than you know, and you can get over there to post-traumatic growth. And she's really got a lot of tools to share with you so that you don't feel so alone and such like you don't have the resources needed. So, Emellina, I want to welcome you to Sex Help with Carol, the coach. It is such a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you, Carol, and good morning. I'm very excited to be here with you, and it's such a pleasure and an honor and privilege to be here as well.
Oh, well, you and I are great colleagues, and I know you've got a gift for teaching and instruction and empathy. So what made you decide that you wanted to help partners today? What made you decide that you wanted to talk about getting through partner betrayal and getting over there to post-traumatic growth?
Well, I would say as a survivor myself of sexual partner betrayal, I have intimate experience with the process of the trauma and healing and post-traumatic growth. And as a licensed marriage and family therapist, it's really my passion to help individuals walk through this journey. And as you mentioned earlier, to not feel alone in the process, that there is a lot of support available for individuals, partners, and for couples to heal and recover from these experiences.
Well, and I know personally that you really enjoy that couples work too. So let me just ask you, what is partner betrayal trauma? How would you explain it to our listening audience?
I would explain partner betrayal trauma as an experience that an individual has with deep, profound emotional and psychological distress. And this is due as a result of discovery or disclosure of their partner's infidelity, such as an affair or sex addiction, porn addiction. This type of trauma is very distinct and different from other forms of trauma due to several key factors. Number one being the breach of trust. Unlike other traumas that may involve external events or strangers, partner sexual betrayal trauma is rooted in the intimate betrayal of trust by a loved one. Often, this is very shocking when this discovery or disclosure is made, and this can lead to a deep sense of abandonment, rejection, and vulnerability. Secondly, it's very interpersonal in nature. The trauma is deeply, again, relational and personal. It really affects and impacts one's being at the core of an individual's sense of self, impacting their security and their attachment, and involving very complex emotional dynamics and challenges that really rock the foundational of the relationship itself. Third is the deep emotional intensity. This emotional pain is unlike any other traumatic pain in that it is multifaceted, encompassing the feelings of complete shock, anger, grief, humiliation, embarrassment, confusion. These depths of emotions is really amplified by the close bond that is shared with the betraying partner. Thirdly is the impact on your self-identity. This really shatters one's own identity and the reality of the world and life that they've had with their partner. So this deeply impacts their self-esteem, their self-worth, their self-concept, really, again, questioning their values, questioning your attractiveness, and leading to deep emotional and identity struggles. And fifth is the chronic and complex nature. Partner sexual betrayal trauma can lead to complex trauma and PTSD, especially when it really hits at the core of one's identity, their self-worth, their value, their role in the relationship and family and community.
You know, we know that trauma is trauma, but in some ways, and we learned this from Barbara Steffens, being that it is relational and it's about the person that you should trust the most and should have your back the most, partner betrayal is trying to find safety in an unsafe situation, a direct quote from Barbara Stephens. And so you talked about all those different areas of the psyche that are affected by partner trauma. And it almost sounds like too big of a hole to dig yourself out of. And you and I both know that there are options for partners. Now, I'm going to ask you, when we talk about how this affects partners, we know that they can dig themselves out of the hole, but first it's to really understand how they're affected. So can you tell us a little bit about how partner trauma affects the brain?
Oh, certainly. Partner sexual betrayal trauma can have a profound and lasting impact on the brain because it impacts several key areas involved in emotional regulation, in memory, and in the stress response. So it typically manifests as amygdala activation, meaning that the amygdala is responsible for detecting threats in our environment. This can cause a trauma trigger in the body's survival mechanism for fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, and the person becomes very hyperactive. This heightened sense of alertness can lead to increased anxiety, hypervigilance, and a constant sense of danger and scanning the environment for safety. Secondly, it impacts the brain's hippocampus. This creates impairment, and the hippocampus is crucial for memory formation and for regulation of stress hormones. And so the hippocampus in the brain can shrink and become less active under a state of chronic distress. And this manifests as difficulties with memory, especially in forming new memories or recalling details, maybe even unrelated to the trauma itself. And thirdly, it impacts the prefrontal cortex. This causes dysfunction in decision-making and analysis, logic and reasoning, impulse control, rational thinking, where the person becomes less efficient, and this leads to problems with concentration, with decision-making, with emotional regulation, and it makes it much more challenging to manage distress and cope with just daily routine and daily living.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned that emotion regulation, and I've met with so many partners that think they're going crazy because they're doing things and saying things that they would never have done before. You know, waking up in the middle of the night, punching the addict, or wanting to kick them down the stairs, or cussing them out, and they say, I never had a violent bone in my body. I'm not aggressive. What is going on with me? And so this is some of the brain science that you're just talking about. That emotion regulation piece gets totally dysregulated and hampered, and they see a whole other side of themselves that they never even knew they had because of the trauma, right?
Absolutely.
Now you mentioned fight, flight, freeze, and then you said fawn. So tell our listening audiences, because that's a relatively new fourth type of amygdala survival response. Tell our listening audience what fawn is.
Of course, fawn is actually when we are people-pleasing. It's a survival response due to a trauma trigger, but the brain will go into this response to create safety. So it's kind of like going along with the situation or with what the person is saying until they can escape into a safer area or safer place. So it's commonly known as people-pleasing.
Okay, got it. So that's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And that is so very, very important. Now, you know, you seem to be a specialist on partner betrayal and how it affects the brain. I'm wondering, you mentioned something earlier about complex post-traumatic stress, and then you also mentioned post-traumatic stress disorder. How do these manifest in partners? What do they look like? And how would a partner know if they're suffering from complex post-traumatic stress disorder or just post-traumatic stress disorder or anxiety?
Okay. What this looks like is typically emotional dysregulation, but this is chronic. Usually with acute post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, it's for a few months. With complex trauma and PTSD due to betrayal trauma, it's much more deep and lasting, leading to continuous intrusive thoughts and flashbacks. Persons will have recurrent involuntary memories of the betrayal, and this can be very distressing, very vivid, and these flashbacks can make them feel as though they are reliving the trauma over and over again. It also leads to hypervigilance and hyperarousal. So individuals affected by this may be in constant state of alertness, feeling on edge and easily startled, leading to difficulty relaxing and with an exaggerated startle response. Mm-hmm. It can also lead to avoidance of behaviors in order to cope with the pain, pretending like everything is okay, living in a state of denial, trying to manage the household and family and children as much as possible. Difficulty trusting others, and this is where it's different than regular PTSD. Because it is an interpersonal relational trauma, the trust has been completely shattered, leading to great challenges in trusting not only our partner, but other people as well. So this severely impacts the person's ability to form new relationships or even maintain their current relationships. There's a lot of stress in the relationships due to emotional dysregulation and also cognitive impairment. So trauma also affects, as we mentioned, the prefrontal cortex, cognitive functions, and can also lead to depression and anxiety. So feelings of hopelessness, persistent sadness, and anxiety are very common. Catastrophizing, anxiety, panic attacks, these are more commonly seen in betrayal trauma.
Okay. Now, it's interesting because when we're looking at complex post-traumatic stress disorder, you said that can be ongoing and very chronic. And one of the things that I know is that so many of my clients have had other betrayals, molestation and rape and just situations that were unexpected and interfered with their sense of safety early on in their life as children, preschoolers, school age, in college. And that also contributes towards complex post-traumatic stress, does it not?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, obviously I would say if you feel, as you're listening to Emellina Belle, if you feel like you're having some of those responses, it's important to get to a partner-sensitive therapist who understands trauma, because you need that combination to really get the help that will take you into a stronger sense of self. Now, I'm going to just jump over for a minute to what tools and resources are available to partners, and especially, you have a really nice-looking website. Can you share with our listening audience your website and what resources and tools you would recommend for our partners?
Of course. My website is Belle MA, and it's focused on relationships, individuals and couples, and betrayal trauma recovery. I would say the first step for individuals and or couples in the therapeutic process for someone that's looking to recover from betrayal trauma would be an assessment from a qualified therapist that has specialized training in this area, and psychoeducation, so learning more about what betrayal trauma looks like and how it impacts the brain and the body, emotions and psychological effects. And within that therapeutic process would be establishing safety and stabilization, because in the very beginning, we are really looking at crisis management especially right after a discovery or disclosure of a betrayal. So that would be the most foundational piece, right, is creating a safe and stable environment for the individual. And some of these techniques may be grounding exercises, guided meditations, mindfulness, yoga, and then thirdly, helping the individual set healthy boundaries of what is comfortable and not comfortable for them, and identifying what they will need. And then fourth, which is very important, is processing the trauma. And this can look like possibly CBT-TF, which is trauma-focused therapy, or EMDR, and also working on rebuilding trust, self-exploration, and empowerment. These will be really important to explore with your therapist, and then also a plan that would include any relapse prevention, from sliding back into hopelessness or depression, and then finally the integration of all of this in post-traumatic growth. So there is information on my website, and also there's so many resources that are available for someone to seek help. So again, you don't have to go through this process alone. We're all here as a community to help support you in your healing and in your growth.
Well, and I want to ask you, because obviously all those tools that you mentioned are ways of stabilizing our partners, and we do believe we're both CSAT certified and also APSAT certified, or in the process of, and we believe that both of those treatment programs have a regime that keeps partners safe as they get healthy. Now, all those resources that you recommended, how does that stabilize the body and also the neuroscience of the brain?
Absolutely. It really helps emotionally regulate the brain and decrease hypervigilance. Because the amygdala in the brain is so highly activated, it is in a constant threat of survival. Mm-hmm. And so the neuroscience really helps to explain how sexual betrayal trauma impacts an individual's mental health and even their physical health and well-being in the brain's response to these events. So stabilization and safety is crucial. Because if our brain is impacted, it makes it very difficult to even function in daily routines in life and making daily decisions. And so it can really cause impairments in one's functioning, and also leading to high levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And so prolonged exposure to these hormones can harm the brain structures and further contributing to symptoms of depression, anxiety, and overall emotional dysregulation. And our goal would be neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity and trauma refers to how trauma can alter the neural pathways, making the brain even more reactive to betrayal-related emotional triggers. And these changes are harmful because they lead to heightened emotional responses and difficulty in managing reactions as further trauma triggers or reminders of the trauma come up, such as if you're driving by the hotel where there was meetings, or if you're seeing set commercials or listening to songs. All of these can be trauma triggers, and of course it impacts our sleep, our mood, being able to stay healthy. So these physiological responses create chronic stress in the brain and body, causing harm. And that can look like potentially headaches or gastrointestinal issues, or even other stress-related medical health problems that can develop from the constant trauma.
Well, and again, for our listening audience, I'm talking with Emellina Belle, And she has a website, and that's Belle Amour, and that's BELLE, and then Amour, AMOUR, and you actually have the Center for Intimacy and Relationships. So you're interested in helping partners get healthy, whether they stay or whether they go. But you also believe in the restoration of a coupleship if they're both willing to work, especially the person with compulsive problematic sexual behavior. And how can the spouse be helpful in restoring that sense of safety?
That's a wonderful question, right? As I mentioned, most couples, when they're coming into a therapist's office, are in crisis. Mm-hmm. So the first foundational piece is creating safety and stabilization for the individual, and this is where the partner can be very helpful and supportive in helping the partner feel safe and stabilized and creating healthy boundaries and honoring and respecting that. So it's crucial that the partner really has compassion and empathy for the harm that has been caused. In fact, I highly recommend your book, Help Them Heal, teaching you both how to heal your relationship after sexual betrayal. And I use this regularly with my couples because it provides a very beautiful workbook that is non-judgmental, that's inclusive, it's non-blaming, and it's very helpful in helping a couple work through these stages and doing it in a very compassionate way where both partners feel respected and heard and seen and validated. So having a framework and a structure to work with, I think, is essential. It's critical because it provides safety in the process and a treatment plan with goals that are being met, and they're scaffolding the foundation of creating healing, empathy, and compassion, and also post-traumatic growth as a long-term goal.
Well, I agree with you 100%, and I always tell my partners, it doesn't require that the spouse create safety for you to get healthy, but it sure does help. And it's a needed ingredient if you're going to stay together, that you end up feeling safe with the person that caused you great harm. Now, we know that's Orcam, and that's just another model that you can use, the early recovery couples empathy model. But there are other ways of doing that. You're John Gottman trained, and Gottman is just a guru in our field, and a lot of people go through his program to find that safety and stabilization. So there are a lot of things out there, and when you look at Emellina Belle's website, what you'll notice is how many resources she has and how many trainings she has. I mean, you're even a sex therapist, correct?
Yes, I'm an ASECT certified sex therapist. I'm passionate about what I do, and I think it's important to have a sex-positive approach, as well as a CSAT therapist. So that's why I obtained both certifications, because one is focused more on addiction and trauma and recovery, and the other one is a very healthy, wholesome, holistic, sex-positive approach. So I think it's important to combine both of them for different treatment plans and goals that an individual or couple is coming in to address.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I just worked with a couple. I'm going to throw a zinger to Emellina. I just worked with a couple this morning, and they love each other. They worked through the betrayal, but they're not having sex. He still continues to have erectile dysfunction, and they're in their 70s. She doesn't have the libido, the hormones, or the lubrication to be able to have sex. What would you advise for them?
Mm-hmm. Actually, I would say that's very common for the age group that the couple is in, and also for sexual addiction recovery. It's not unusual for that stage to happen in that process of healing and rebuilding the relationship. The first piece that I do in an assessment is to ask both individual partners to have a consultation with their primary care physician, for the female partner to have an appointment with her OBGYN, and for the male partner to have an appointment with the urologist. And that's to make sure that they are healthy, to address if there are any cardiovascular issues, to address hormones for women and men, and to rule out any bioorganic medical conditions that may be present. Now, of course, we're all subject to normal aging process, and so as we age, our hormones, our progesterone, estrogen, estradiol, and testosterone does decline. But there are options available that you can speak to with your physician, and look at the pros and cons or the benefits and costs of these, whether it's bioidentical hormones or for women using lubrication to make it more comfortable. A water-based lubricant is better than oil-based. And then also for men, whether they would be staged to be a candidate for Cialis or Viagra. And it would be, good to get a cardiologist or your primary care physician to give you clearance. Again, making sure that you're safe, that you're cleared medically, and so that would be just foundational to start with for individuals and couples, but especially for a couple, it's important to continue sexual intimacy, and that doesn't always have to be sexual intercourse, right? There could be other ways to have pleasure and to have that emotional and sexual intimate connection, right? And so being, I think, more open-minded, whether it's pleasuring through oral sex or other forms of physical touch, being creative, using romance, also doing more innovative, fun, playful things that you can bring in. So being, I think, more open-minded as to what we can do to connect more creatively. And as long as, both partners give consent and it's not harmful, and the goal is really for emotional and sexual intimate connection. And so I think that's helpful to know that there are other ways that we can continue to be sexually active even into our 90s.
Right.
But it just might look a little different than when we were young in our 20s or 30s. But we can definitely continue to be, sexually intimate as we age, well into 80s or even 90.
Well, and I know that for many partners, it can be scary to add new things into the sex life. They're always afraid. Are they doing anything that the other person may have done, if there was actual physical cheating? And, it's so important to be playful as well as romantic. I mean, those two things need to merge, and that means being creative and really communicating with each other what the other person might feel is pleasurable. As simple as a feather, and having your body rubbed with a feather or a boa, there's just a million different ways that you can create a new experience that you've never had with your partner as you're rebuilding that physical and sexual and emotional connection, right?
Absolutely. You're right on point. I agree with you 1,000%. And one of the wonderful things that couples can start with is sensate focus. And that's all about touch, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. Because if you haven't been sexually intimate in a long time, it can be really scary or intimidating or threatening to jump back into trying to be sexually intimate again. So sensate focus is a really beautiful way to slowly introduce touch, in a massage, and what feels good and what I don't like and what I do like, and then bring in, feathers and velvet or just different forms of sensual experiences without the pressure of actually having to have sexual intercourse. So it's a really beautiful way for couples to reconnect and bring sexual intimacy back into their lives when there's been a long period of no sex or very little contact.
Yeah, because sometimes that no sex started as the addict was in full-blown addiction and the spouse got thrown to the wayside. We're talking about how to bring the brain back into a place of healthy neuroplasticity and developing new neural circuitry that brings about connection and emotion. So I'm going to ask you, because obviously you do believe in post-traumatic growth, and you just described the many struggles of a partner and the trauma that they may have experienced. What do you advise for partners who want to find their post-traumatic growth?
That's an excellent question. Post-traumatic growth refers to positive psychological changes that individuals can experience because of struggling with or coping with a major life crisis or traumatic event. And so this is what PTG would look like to those healing from betrayal trauma. The first is a personal strength. So this means that individuals may discover new inner strengths and resilience that they did not realize that they actually possessed. And surviving betrayal trauma can lead to deeper understanding of one's own capabilities and their inner resources. Secondly is changed priorities. The experience of betrayal trauma can prompt a reevaluation of our values, our priorities, our life goals, leading to reflection and clarity, a clearer sense of what is truly important and what is meaningful in my life. Thirdly is enhanced relationships. So while the betrayal can damage the trust, it really shattered it deeply in the relationship, some individuals find that healing strengthens their other relationships that they have in their lives, and it can deepen empathy, compassion, and communication. Fourth is spirituality. So spiritual growth is a component of PTG. For some, betrayal trauma can lead to a search for a deeper meaning or spiritual growth. Prompting existential questions about the meaning of life, exploration of one's own core values and beliefs. Fifth would be new possibilities. So overcoming betrayal trauma can open up new opportunities for personal growth and development. It can lead to a greater sense of empowerment and agency in shaping and determining one's life and their future. Sixth would be resilience. Post-traumatic growth involves developing greater resiliency in adversity, and this resilience can really help couples cope more effectively with future challenges and when there are relapses and setbacks. And lastly, seventh would be an appreciation of life. Complex trauma can foster a greater appreciation for life and not taking it for granted in a sense of purpose and gratitude and creating a more deeply positive outlook for life itself. So it doesn't negate the pain and the challenges of the trauma, but it rather acknowledges that growth and positive change is possible and it can emerge from these difficult, challenging experiences. And I believe that psychotherapy and support is crucial in being able to facilitate the post-traumatic growth process because it provides a safe framework and space for processing these emotions, for exploring new perspectives, and for developing coping strategies as well.
Well, it's no doubt that your own experience of partner trauma helped to prompt you to get into this field. And you started out, I believe you started out with ITAP, and then you did ASECT, right? So
yes.
You really understand sexual addiction or problematic sexual behavior and partner trauma. And when you merge the two, you've got a professional who can really guide you whether you stay or whether you go. And we always want couples to stay if that's a possibility, but if it's not working, if there's not enough recovery, if it continues to hurt, separation can be one of the healthiest things that can happen for a partner to develop positive traumatic growth in his or herself. And so we just are people that understand there's a variety of possibilities for you. And as we end for today, what would you like our listening audience to know to help them on their journey towards, as you put it, empowerment and post-traumatic growth and renewed hope?
I think it's just important to acknowledge that it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something I'm just going to get over quickly. There's no way that can actually happen. And to have patience and self-compassion with the journey. This is something that takes time, and healing and recovery cannot be rushed. So it's important to be in the moment, process those painful feelings, stay in the healing process in order to come out on the other side with post-traumatic growth and recovery. So patience, I think, is really critical. It is a process. Most couples, according to the research, depending on the study, it takes approximately 3+ years for couples to recover. Some less, some more. And just as with individuals that are in betrayal trauma recovery, it can be 2 to 3 years. Again, some less, some more. So it is a process that does take time for healing and recovery. So I think having compassion for yourself as a person and for the partner to really hold space for support and compassion as their partner is healing from this and the relationship recovers. And also to honor where the client is at. Some individuals will want an in-house separation where they're still living in the same house but in separate rooms. Or other individuals may want a separation where they're in different homes and residences. And some couples will want a divorce. Most couples will stay together, but that's I think for the client to determine. And I think it's important as a therapist for me to honor and respect where the individual is at each phase of the process, and to really support them in their own efficacy and their own decision-making process.
Well, Emellina Belle, Belle, I am so happy to have interviewed you today. For more information about her or her website, go to Belle, Belle, Amour, Amour, and look at her Center for Intimacy and Relationships, and just know you're in good hands when it comes to partner betrayal, as well as the coupleship when you're working with Emellina. Thank you so much for sharing your time today.
Thank you so much, Carol, for hosting today's very insightful discussion. I've thoroughly enjoyed our time together. This platform really provides these beautiful conversations that are so valuable and needed. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us, and your engagement is what makes these discussions meaningful and powerful. So I'm looking forward to meeting in the future. Until next time, take care.
Right. Well, and this won't be our first podcast together, so we'll do many more in advance. Thank you again, and talk to you later. So as you can see, she has a lot of insight about partner betrayal, very, very bright, very empathetic. Anybody who gets to work with her is lucky as all get out. And I feel kind of lucky. I'm just going to share with you a quick story. I had a girls' week, and it was amazing. It was our 27th annual, and we had fun in the sun and on boats and late-night talks and plenty of food. And I came home a little bit early and visited with my husband's family, who they actually were doing a funeral. And then I came home, we watched some TV, I sat with my husband and the dog, had a wonderful night, headed to bed, and all of a sudden I had this grip of life on my heart. And I looked at my husband and I said, I don't think I'm having a heart attack. Something is going on, and it's seriously wrong with my heart. Can you feel the beat? And he couldn't, but it felt like it was racing out of my body. So after about 10 minutes of trying to walk it off, I went to the hospital, and I had a heartbeat of over 200 beats per minute, which is very serious. And after many administrations of medication, they couldn't get it back to its original state. And I got the paddle. Not once, the paddle didn't work, but twice. And the most interesting thing about that was that they put me under so that I wouldn't feel the paddle with ketamine, which you're all hearing a lot about. Ketamine is being used for just a whole host of things, including depression and anesthesia. And I will tell you more about that experience because I tripped my brains out during the paddling, which of course I didn't feel, and afterwards. So more to come on the experience of getting your heart back into rhythm. I'm perfectly fine now. My heart is strong. I wasn't going to tell Emellina ahead of time because I didn't want her to think I was compromised. But I thought I'd tell you. So we'll see you next week for more sex help with Carol the Coach. And as I say at the end of every show, there will only be one of you at all times, so I want you to fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. Make it a good day, and we'll talk to you soon.